time to focus on the big picture ahead of the opening bell. Francis Gannon, Co-Chief Investment Officer at Royce Investment Partners, is with me. We have so much to discuss. I mean, first of all, we did get in our first inflation print. Tomorrow we'll get the CPI. Your thoughts on the big picture here when it comes to inflation and the economy?
Well, I think the economy's been much more resilient than people give it credit for. I think one of the themes we heard from companies in the second quarter in their reporting season was that things seem to be okay. There's so much uncertainty in the market these days, and I know investors are worried about that. But I think at the moment, the economy's been relatively resilient. And I know we have a labor issue, the labor numbers, et cetera, that came out, the unemployment numbers that came out last week. So I think my inclination, this is not what we kind of focus on here as a firm, but my inclination is we probably will see the Fed ease at some point in September.
Yeah, understood. You really have been excited about small caps. Tell me about the stealth move that we've seen in small caps. Folks who invest in small caps have been waiting probably a decade, right? As they saw tech taking off and bull markets that began, small caps were left behind, but not lately.
Yeah, since the low of April 8th through actually last night, you could say small caps have outperformed by about 400 or 500 basis points. And I think it's gone largely unrecognized in the overall market. And the question seems to be, is it something that is going to continue? And we would argue that it is going to continue. Part of the reason why we feel this way is obviously there's the valuation discrepancy between large and small. Even with the move in the market, you are seeing relative valuations for small caps being much cheaper than those of large. In a world where large caps continue to hit new highs, small caps have yet to hit a new high. You'd have to go back to November of 21 or even 24 to have a new high in the small cap market. So the big key for us going forward is going to be earnings. We feel the small cap earnings, which turned positive in the second quarter after being negative for 2 years, really coming out of that earnings recession for the small cap space, is going to be key to this market, the small caps continuing to outperform. And we do see that happening in the third quarter, where you could see small cap earnings actually outperform large cap earnings. And I think that's going to be an exciting moment for those of us in the small cap asset class.
Lower rate environment, does that fit into your scenario too?
Well, lower rates would obviously help, and I think that's starting to be built in a little bit to the small cap market. We've seen that anticipation of lower rates coming up. Obviously, small cap companies, as measured by the Russell 2000, about 40% of their debt is variable. So if rates come down, that will help the bottom line. But I think the other thing that investors might be missing when thinking about an economic standpoint is what the president signed earlier this year. In that bill, you do see 100% depreciation on CapEx. And you could be at the start of a CapEx cycle that will really benefit a lot of small cap companies. And I think that's kind of part of the story that investors are missing.
What kind of small caps? I mean, it's not all small caps, right? You have to find the ones that have a story or have a good valuation. How are you picking the small cap winners?
We've been kind of focused on for a period of time for those economically sensitive areas of the market, really industrials, to be quite honest with you, as a major focus of ours. There are a lot of industrial companies in the middle of the country that are really not getting the benefit that you're seeing from some of the bigger companies on the coast, if you will, but that are going to be very important going forward. There's an enormous amount of innovation in these companies, and I think that you're going to see industrial businesses of all type actually benefit as you see continued reshoring take place and the reindustrialization in the United States. And I think that's going to be driving a lot of the earnings story in small caps. The thing about small caps right now is if you took the Russell 2000 as a percentage of the Russell 3000, at the end of the second quarter, that number was 4.2%. You'd have to go back to the 80s, the 1980s, to see a similar type number. Even after the move we've seen, it's only jumped to 4.4%. And the actual level that it typically is throughout history is close to 8%. So any rotation or broadening out of the overall market, I think, is going to be significant. And I think it has some legs here for small caps.
And so what about the large cap sort of balance? Do you have to have some liking to some of the large caps as well? And if so, which ones do you choose? And when do you choose them?
So large cap is not an area of the market we tend to focus on. Our firm is solely dedicated to the small cap asset class. I am intrigued by what we saw this morning with Oracle, only because I think the part of the broadening story in the market today is you're going to see the AI story start to spread out. And I think that's happening today with Oracle. You're going to see AI really the focus of AI really shift from those that have been making right and creating AI to those who are going to be the beneficiaries of AI. So I like to say AI is coming to a small cap company near you. And I think that's going to be another driver of the broadening of the overall market away from the highly concentrated upper end of the S&P 500 into other pockets that are benefiting from AI.
All right. And then big picture, when you think that you might have with these small caps, different areas, how you might rotate within the group at all. I mean, it's nice to see that the earnings are positive after a couple of negative years, right? That's very telling.
Oh, I think that's going to be key. The earnings story to small cap, I worked for a gentleman years ago who used to say psychology runs the market in the long term, in the short term, but earnings runs the market in the long term. And earnings for the small cap cycle turning here really from negative to positive, and then going to be outperforming large. We think at least in the third quarter, but definitely by the end of the year, is significant. And I think it just adds to the small cap story that investors should be focusing on today.
All right. Well, it's great to see you, Francis. Thank you. Francis Gannon, Co-Chief Investment Officer, Royce Investment Partners. Thank you.